Okay, so behind me is my 2004 Chevy Monte Carlo, and I'm going to be removing the transmission. I've noticed on tons of research online, there's nothing on removing the transmission or motor in this vehicle. So I've pulled several transmissions and motors from other vehicles, so I figured I could tackle the job. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Right now I'm about to lower it at the bottom, but I'm going to show you everything you have to disconnect and kind of a order on how to do it. Hopefully this helps you. And remember, I'm not certified in anything. This is more for informational purposes, so if you screw up your car, I'm not responsible. I'm just sideburn certified. The first thing you're going to want to remove is there's a cross member right here, and then get your battery unhooked, positive and negative. And there's a big wiring harness right here. I disconnected after that. That is your main wiring for your engine. Next thing I did is I came over and took out my air box that connects up to the throttle body right in here. You're going to want to unhook your throttle, all your fuel lines up top. Then you can unhook your top motor mounts. Next thing I did, I removed my alternator from up top. And remember, when you're removing wires, it's always helpful to mark both ends of the wires. Then from the bottom, I removed my wheels to get more space to work. You're gonna have to take off your tie rods. Once you get the tie rods out, up in here you've got your power steering, and that's a little tricky. There's 2 bolts in your power steering on these cars. You have to go through and get those off, and of course you'd remove the belt before that. Your air conditioner is right down in here. You can see it there. You're going to want to disconnect that too and attach that to the body, because I'm going to be dropping the motor from the bottom, and that way you don't have to undo lines because that's on a pressurized system. Follow this whole wiring harness and it hooks into your transmission right here. You're going to have to remove that. Remove all your coolant lines, and watch, they're going to spill coolant everywhere. I went ahead and undid my brake line at the caliper. That way I wouldn't break any of the brake lines and they can be reused. Unbolt the top of your struts on both sides, up here in the engine compartment again. And what I went ahead and I did, it looks a little bit sketchy, but I jacked the car up on some firewood. That way I don't have a lift here, and that way it's a lot easier to access the stuff and you're not breaking your neck, because it's going to take several hours to get all this stuff disconnected. Right in there's your starter. You're going to have to undo the 4 wires, or 3 wires going to the starter. There's another wiring harness that goes to your temperature gauge in your motor, and then there's another one that goes into your oil pan. Just keep undoing stuff. You have your coolant lines for your transmission. Those both need undone. Here's the exhaust pipe going into the rear manifold. There's 2 bolts in there that are 1/2 inch. Those are kind of tricky to get, but you're going to have to remove those in order to drop the subframe. And then right here, there's a bolt that goes to the power steering arm. And there's the bracket right there. You have to undo both of those and get the bolts out, because the power steering will stay with the car when you drop the whole cradle. I'll also note, I did remove the front bumper. I'm not sure if this was necessary or not, but my front clip was cracked because the previous owner got in a tiny accident. So I went ahead and removed that, as well as the headlights. It's made it easier because there's not as much bulk and you can get to stuff a lot more easily, but I don't know if I would recommend that or not. I was just removing it because I'm replacing it. I believe I've covered most everything. It's always important to go through and double check, and when you do start to drop it, make sure you go nice and slow. I'm going to go ahead and lower the car back down to the ground off of my log stands and begin to remove, but before I do that, I want to go ahead and break free. There's 4 bolts that bolt your cradle in. There's one there and one there at the identical other side. There's one big bolt there and one bolt and bushing there. So I'm going to go ahead and break all those free before I get this in position to lower the cradle. I got a jack on each side of the car here. I'm slowly lowering it back down to the ground. I'm going to throw my rollers underneath my subframe. That way the motor, transmission, everything will come down, and then I'm going to slowly jack the body of the car back up away from the motor and subframe. Monte Carlo's finally at ground level again. I got some 4x4s and put them on these rollers right up against the subframe, all the way on both sides. As you can see, right about here, about an inch gap, I've already started jacking the frame off. I got the car jacked up about a foot right now. Right here, my power steering is hung up by a bungee cord, as well as the tie rod ends, and that whole assembly is all the way back there, so that's clear. Now I'm just gonna jack the car up until the motor can clear up and I can roll it out. The method I'm using is I'm jacking it up as high as the jack will go, throwing a jack stand, lowering it, and then I'm just stacking blocks on top of the jacks. Just be real careful and don't stand underneath. You can see more and more of the engine as we go every couple of pumps. Here's another update. The cradle's on the ground now, as you can see. Still need a little bit more clearance to come out. I'll show you a top view. See the motor sunk in a decent ways now. Still make sure you're double checking all your wiring, make sure nothing pinches. We're beginning to see the front of the motor mounted in the cradle on the ground. Right here is the whole motor dropped in the driveway with basic tools and jacks. Use tool jacks and some sockets, and that's about it. That's all you need. Here's the old car. No motor in there anymore. Here we have the 3800 motor. Doing a transmission swap on it. That right there is how you pull your motor out of a 2004 Monte Carlo.